The 28-year-old software engineer had pulled another all-nighter debugging code. His vintage military surplus t-shirt, wrinkled from hours, hunched over his laptop. The faded green fabric bore the words, "Improvise, adapt, overcome," in barely visible black letters, a shirt he'd bought at a thrift store years ago, without really thinking about its meaning. The room filled with an impossible hum, like the sound of electricity given voice. Marcus looked up from his screen, just as reality seemed to bend inward. The air shimmered, and suddenly his cramped studio apartment was gone, replaced by a vast metallic chamber filled with beings that shouldn't exist. The Korthic soldiers were 8 feet tall, their reptilian scales gleaming under harsh alien lighting. Their commander, General Vextar, examined Marcus with yellow predator eyes, his forked tongue tasting the air with obvious disgust. Another pathetic specimen from the third planet. He hissed in heavily accented English, the words filtered through their translation matrix. "Look at this creature, no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. And what is this ridiculous covering?" One of the subordinates poked at Marcus's t-shirt with a claw. "Decorative fabric, General. They seem to use it to display meaningless symbols. This one shows their primitive attachment to abstract concepts." Marcus said nothing, his mind racing as he processed the situation. The rational part of his brain insisted this had to be a dream, but the cold metal floor against his bare feet felt real enough. Around the chamber, he noticed other beings, creatures from what must be dozens of different worlds, all looking equally confused and terrified. "The arena games begin tomorrow," General Vextar announced to the assembled captives. "You will fight for our entertainment until you die. The strong will last longer than the weak, but you will all die eventually. Take comfort in knowing your deaths will at least serve a purpose, teaching our youth about the superiority of the Korthic species." As guards herded them toward holding cells, Marcus caught fragments of conversation between the Korthic officers. They spoke of Earth as a weaponless world, its inhabitants evolution's failures. They laughed about humans' lack of natural defenses, mocking their dependence on external tools. As a sign of inherent weakness, Marcus touched the faded letters on his shirt and almost smiled. If only they knew that humans had turned weakness into the ultimate strength. His ancestors hadn't evolved claws because they'd learned to sharpen sticks. They hadn't grown thicker hide because they'd learned to weave cloth and forge steel. Every apparent disadvantage had become an opportunity to innovate. The holding cell was bare metal, designed to contain beings with natural weapons. But Marcus saw possibilities everywhere. The slight gap where the floor met the wall, the way condensation collected on the ceiling, even the rough texture of his own clothing. He began to plan. The arena stretched before Marcus like a concrete Colosseum, its walls rising toward alien stars. Thousands of Korthic spectators roared their approval as the first entertainment began. The sand beneath his feet was stained dark with the blood of previous combats, and scattered across the arena floor were the deliberately placed remnants of various civilizations' broken pottery, twisted metal, fragments of stone. In the red corner, the announcer's voice boomed through translation implants. "We have Thrakmer, champion gladiator of the Korthic Empire, winner of 300 consecutive battles." The crowd erupted as a massive reptilian warrior emerged, his natural armor gleaming, razor-sharp claws extended, and a mouthful of teeth designed for tearing flesh. And in the blue corner, the pathetic human specimen from the weaponless world. Laughter echoed through the stadium as Marcus walked into the arena wearing nothing but his jeans and the faded t-shirt. To the Korthic, he looked like exactly what they expected: soft, weak, defenseless. Thrakmer charged immediately, confident in a quick victory. But Marcus had spent the night observing the arena's layout through the cell's small window. He dove and rolled, his human agility surprising. the crowd as he avoided the gladiator's claws by inches. While Thrakmer's momentum carried him forward, Marcus grabbed a shard of broken pottery and 2 lengths of what looked like discarded wire. "What is it doing?" General Vexstar muttered from his viewing box. "Why doesn't it simply accept death? Like a proper prey species?" Marcus bound the pottery shard to one end of the wire with his shoelace, creating a makeshift flail. As Thrakmer turned for another charge, Marcus whipped the improvised weapon forward. The ceramic fragment struck the gladiator's eye with surgical precision, drawing first blood and sending him staggering backward in shock. The arena fell silent. In 300 battles, no opponent had ever drawn blood from Thrakmer in the first exchange. But Marcus wasn't finished. While the gladiator pawed at his injured eye, Marcus used the second wire to create a snare trap, positioning it carefully in the sand near a piece of twisted metal. When Thrakmer charged again, blind, with rage, his foot caught in the wire loop. He crashed forward, and Marcus used the gladiator's own momentum to drive the metal fragment deep into an unarmored joint between his neck scales. Thrakmer collapsed, his lifeblood pooling in the sand. The silence stretched for long seconds before, erupting into confused roars. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humans were supposed to be weak. As guards escorted him back to his cell, Marcus heard fragments of heated discussion among the Korthak officers. They were arguing about human physiology, about whether their intelligence reports had been wrong. One suggested performing additional tests. Another recommended simply executing all human specimens immediately. Marcus said nothing, but his hand unconsciously brushed the words on his shirt. Improvise, adapt, overcome. He'd done all 3 in less than 5 minutes, using nothing but refuse and his own bootlace. The Korthak thought they were watching a fluke. Marcus knew they were witnessing the beginning of their education in human potential. Tomorrow would bring a stronger opponent, but it would also bring new opportunities, new materials to weaponize, new chances to show these aliens exactly why. Humans had inherited the Earth. Marcus's second opponent was Krextal, a crystalline being whose body could reform after damage and whose limbs could extend into deadly spikes. The Korthak had chosen carefully this time a creature that could adapt physically, something they assumed would counter human unpredictability. But as Marcus surveyed the arena, now littered with new debris from overnight preparations, he spotted his real opponent, the Korthak mindset itself. They'd added what they considered useless materials cleaning supplies from various worlds, eating utensils, decorative items, thinking they were being generous by giving him more objects to die with. Marcus almost laughed. They'd handed him a chemistry set. The engineer in him cataloged the available resources: a bottle of what smelled like ammonia-based cleaner, several containers of different acids used for maintaining alien metals, a handful of iron filings, and various organic compounds from food preparation areas. His software debugging skills kicked in. This was just another problem requiring systematic analysis and creative solutions. Krextal attacked immediately, his arms extending into crystalline spears that could pierce armor. But Marcus was already moving, rolling toward a cluster of cleaning supplies while pulling threads from his t-shirt. The cotton fibers weren't just fabric anymore. They were fuses. As the crystalline warrior pursued him, Marcus quickly mixed the ammonia cleaner with one of the metallic acids in a discarded food container. The reaction produced a violent foam that ate through crystal structure like biological acid through flesh. He soaked one of his improvised cotton fuses in the mixture. "The human is playing with household chemicals," one Korthak observer noted dismissively. Pathetic final moments. Krextal lunged forward, confident in his regenerative abilities. Marcus waited until the last possible second, then threw the acid-soaked container directly at his opponent's core. The crystalline being's instincts worked against him. He absorbed the container into his body structure, Thinking it was a desperate physical attack, the chemical reaction began immediately. Krextal's form started dissolving from the inside out, his regenerative abilities useless against a molecular-level assault he couldn't understand. Within minutes, the arena's supposed adaptive champion was reduced to a puddle of inert minerals. The crowd's reaction was different this time, not just confusion, but the first stirrings of concern. General Vextar's jaw worked silently as he processed what he'd witnessed. This wasn't luck or a single clever trick. This was systematic problem-solving, the kind of intelligence that turned any environment into a workshop. "Bring me the human's file," he ordered his aide. "Everything we know about their species." In his cell that night, Marcus met other survivors from previous games beings from a dozen worlds who'd been kept alive for entertainment value. There was Zixara, an insectoid engineer whose own species had been conquered despite their advanced technology, and Gorth, a massive creature with natural armor plating who'd learned to use finesse instead of brute force. "How?" Zixara asked simply, her compound eyes reflecting Marcus's image dozens of times. "Our people built starships, created artificial intelligence, and we fell within days. You have no technology, no weapons, yet you defeat their champions with refuse." Marcus touched his shirt again, feeling the faded letters under his fingertips. "That's exactly why it works," he said quietly. "You built starships, so you fought like starship builders. They expected starship tactics, but humans? We've never had just one way of doing anything. We're not specialized, we're adaptable." He gestured toward the arena. "Tomorrow they'll probably send something that's immune to chemical attacks. So I won't use chemistry. I'll find their blind spot, figure out what they don't expect, and hit them there. Because that's what we do. We find ways to win with whatever we have." Gorth rumbled approval. "The soft ones teach the strong ones how to fight." "No," Marcus corrected, pulling threads from his shirt to weave into tomorrow's arsenal. "The human ones teach everyone that there's always another way." The third day brought Marcus face to face with Nexthara, a shape-shifting predator that could mimic any form and learn from each opponent's tactics. The Quarthic had finally chosen a creature that embodied their idea of ultimate adaptation biological. Perfection that could counter any strategy. But as Marcus stepped into the arena, he realized the Quarthic had made their greatest mistake yet. They'd given him an opponent that thought like they did. Nexthara immediately began cycling through forms first, copying Thrakmer's size and claws, then Krextal's crystalline spikes, finally settling into a hybrid shape that combined the most dangerous aspects of Marcus's previous opponents. The shapeshifter was thinking tactically, using proven effective forms. Marcus didn't even look at his opponent. Instead, he knelt and began pulling apart his t-shirt, separating the remaining cotton threads while scanning the arena's new layout. The Quarthic had tried to eliminate useful materials this time, leaving only sand, a few pieces of smooth stone, and what they considered completely inert materials, chunks of insulation foam, scraps of flexible tubing, and a handful of small ball bearings from some alien machinery. "What is the human doing?" General Vextar leaned forward, his predator instincts finally recognizing something dangerous in Marcus's calm behavior. "It's not even watching its opponent." Nexthara charged, confident in her hybrid form's overwhelming advantages. But Marcus had already woven his cotton threads through the ball bearings, creating a primitive but effective bola. He spun it overhead and released it at precisely the right moment, the weighted threads wrapping around Nexthara's legs and sending her crashing into the sand. While she struggled to free herself, Marcus stuffed the insulation foam into one end of the flexible tubing, creating a blowgun. The ammunition was simple sand packed into small projectiles using more cotton fiber. Not dangerous by itself, but Marcus wasn't aiming to kill with the projectiles. He was aiming for the eyes. Nexthara adapted quickly, growing additional sensory organs to compensate for her temporarily impaired vision. But Marcus had already moved to the next phase of his plan. He used the remaining tubing to create a slingshot, loading it with the smooth stones while taking position behind one of the arena's support pillars. The shapeshifter grew frustrated, cycling through increasingly aggressive forms as she tried to pin down her elusive opponent. Each adaptation made her more dangerous, but also more predictable. She was thinking like a Korthic, more power, more armor, more direct defensive capability. Marcus was thinking like a human maximum, effectiveness with minimal resources. The final phase came when Nexthara, desperate to end the fight, assumed her most terrifying form, yet a creature of pure predatory rage, covered in armor and bristling with weapons. She charged directly at Marcus's position, confident that overwhelming force would finally succeed. Marcus waited until she was 3 steps away, then dove aside while simultaneously releasing his slingshot's tension. The stone struck a specific point on the arena wall he'd identified earlier, a structural weak point where different materials met. The impact cracked the wall, and a shower of sharp fragments rained down directly onto Nexthara's transformed body. But the falling debris wasn't the real attack. While Nexthara instinctively protected herself from the fragments, Marcus used his last cotton thread, now soaked with shapeshifter blood from the earlier encounters, to create a garrote. He slipped behind his distracted opponent and applied the stranglehold with surgical precision. Nexthara could adapt to direct attacks, chemical assaults, even environmental hazards. But she couldn't adapt to suffocation combined with psychological warfare. As consciousness faded, she heard Marcus whisper, "You can copy our forms, but you'll never copy what makes us human." The arena erupted in chaos. 3 champions dead, killed by a creature the Korthic had dismissed as weaponless and weak. In his viewing box, General Vextar finally understood what they were facing. "Seal the arena," he ordered. "Execute all remaining prisoners immediately." But his aide hesitated. "General, the other species are watching. If we break our own combat laws, then we face them tomorrow," Vextar snarled. "The human dies tonight, or we all die eventually." Marcus woke to alarms blaring throughout the Korthic facility. Through his cell's small window, he could see emergency lights flashing and soldiers running through corridors with obvious panic. The other prisoners were awake too, pressing against their cell doors and trying to understand the commotion. "They're going to execute us," Ysara said matter-of-factly. "Your victories have scared them too much." But Marcus was listening to the alarm patterns, his engineer's mind automatically analyzing the rhythm and frequency. "No," he said slowly. "This isn't an execution alarm. This is a containment breach warning." Gorth's massive form shifted in the darkness. "What does that mean, soft human?" "It means," Marcus replied, pulling the last threads from his now tattered t-shirt, "that someone else is causing problems, and chaos is the best environment for adaptation." The cell doors suddenly hissed open, not from Korthak command, but from emergency protocols triggered by whatever crisis was unfolding above. Marcus stepped into the corridor to find dozens of alien prisoners emerging from their own cells, all looking to him for leadership. "The human knows the way," Zixara announced to the growing crowd. "Follow the one who defeats champions with thread and stone." As they moved through the facility's corridors, Marcus realized the containment breach was a revolt by enslaved species throughout the Korthic Empire. His arena victories had been broadcast across their territory as entertainment, but instead of demonstrating human weakness, they'd shown something far more dangerous, the possibility of victory against impossible odds. General Vextar was waiting in the main arena, now sealed and heavily guarded. He wore full combat armor and carried energy weapons that could vaporize a human instantly. Around him stood his elite guard, 20 of the Empire's deadliest warriors. I should have killed you immediately, Vextar hissed through his helmets. Speakers, your species is a virus, spreading the delusion that the weak can overcome the strong. Marcus walked into the arena wearing only his jeans and the remains of his t-shirt. Now nothing more than a few strips of faded fabric barely held together by the collar. To the Korthik, he looked more pathetic than ever. But the other prisoners saw something different in his confident stride. You still don't understand, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly in the sealed arena. You think this is about weak versus strong, but humans never think in those terms. We think in terms of problems and solutions. Vextar raised his energy. Weapon. Then solve this problem, human. Marcus smiled and pulled his ruined t-shirt over his head, holding it like a flag. The faded words improvise, adapt, overcome were still barely visible on the tattered fabric. I already have. He threw the shirt high into the air, and every eye in the arena followed its arc. In that moment of distraction, the human did what humans do best. He adapted the situation to his advantage. While the guards watched the falling fabric, Marcus had already moved, using their own momentary confusion against them. But the t-shirt wasn't just a distraction. As it fell toward General Vextar, Marcus grabbed it and used the fabric to blind the general's helmet sensors. Before Vextar could clear his vision, Marcus had stripped the energy weapon from his hands and turned it on the elite guard. The battle was brief, but decisive. 20 elite warriors, defeated by a human using their own weapons and their own tactical assumptions against them. When the smoke cleared, Marcus stood over General Vextar N's unconscious form, the energy weapon in his hands and his tattered t-shirt soaked with alien blood. He raised the shirt above his head like a banner, and the crowd of liberated prisoners erupted in cheers that echoed throughout the facility. The message was clear. If humans could win here, anyone could win anywhere. Improvise, adapt, overcome, Marcus shouted, his voice carrying through the facility's communication systems to every Korthik stronghold across their empire. That's not just a human motto, it's a universal truth. And today, the universe learns that truth. Within ours, the revolt spread across dozens of worlds. The Korthik Empire, built on the assumption that the strong would always dominate the weak, crumbled when faced with the simple human concept that intelligence could turn any weakness into strength. Asterisk.